know for a fact I'm not going to go to jail. Not one day in jail. I'm going to laugh my off when all these motherfuckers are saying I'm going for 30 years, 20 years, 5 years, 10 years. Bro, I'm telling you, I'm not even going to do one day, bro. They're going to give me a fine. They're going to say, don't come back to Korea. You're the one who's going to look so dumb when I don't get any jail time or anything. Like, bro, I'm going to laugh like a villain.
Johnny Somali, aka Ramzi Khalid Ismail, has been sentenced to 6 months and 20 days in prison with labor in Seoul, South Korea today. We're gonna get that today on The Legal Mindset. We teach you to be around judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney who's been tracking this from beginning to end. And today we're gonna break out the exact reasons for the guilty plea, his imprisonment, his sentence, and what happens next. So let's get into what happened today in Seoul, South Korea. So first of all, to just get to my opening statements, Ramzi Khalid Ismail, aka Johnny Somali, was found guilty on all 8 charges. So there were 4 counts of business obstruction, 2 counts of the Minor Crimes Act, and 2 counts of the deepfake distribution. Guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison with labor, an additional 20 days of detention, and 5 years of offender status, with his phones being permanently confiscated. But how did we get there? Well, we got there through a team effort. I started this in front of the same courtroom, and their photo here today is a photo, and once again, in front of that same courtroom today. But it was a team effort. My team, the Somali conviction team, worked very hard submitting evidence, submitting facts, and really getting into it with this process where we wanted to have jail time instead of the normal process where foreigners are often just given a fine and let go, which we thought could be a very, very real possibility if there was not more attention on this. And you can see we had Korean media which interviewed us, and many people from the team were there. You've got Professor Ulrich Nod, you've got Kangmin Lee, who's showed up off of X, you've got Atozi, you've got myself, Gabe, another individual who showed up who saw the coverage, you've got Atozi's editor. Everybody worked together. This was a huge team effort. There are a lot of people that aren't even pictured in this that worked together to get this done. And because of the coverage of this, and also the coverage in Korean media, as you see here, that actually led to a different result than normal. But let's get into the trial facts itself. So how did the trial start? Well, the trial started packed with observers. Now, the first time I came, there was hardly anybody in that courtroom about 1.5 years ago. However, today, standing room only. People were standing, sitting on the floor, all there for Somali. They had to put up actually the red tape. They had to line people up. It was very, very much more chaotic than normal. Now, strict security was enforced. There was no phones or recording, as well as no reactions or expression. At one point, when someone smiled during the courtroom, the bailiff actually corrected them to, hey, no expressions, no, keep it serious, keep it somber. And the judge did remain the same throughout the trial. Now, the prosecutor did change in the spring from the older male prosecutor that was there before to a new female prosecutor, which was there today in this case. Now, what happened? Well, first, there was the guilty portion, because first they had to assess the guilt, because Ramzi had pled guilt on 6 of the charges, the business obstruction and the Minor Crimes Act, but still reasserted his non-guilty plea regarding the deepfakes. So the judge found Somali guilty on the deepfakes, as we predicted he would, because a reasonable person of the age and gender of the victims would experience shame at the deepfakes. The judge then went on to say, okay, you're guilty. Now let's talk about sentencing. And he said, in his opinion, there were both mitigating and aggravating factors for the sentencing of Somali. So the mitigating factors that he explained in this case were for that victims Youngman and Hank Yu did not want Somali to be punished. And there has been a settlement with Youngman that they tried to get the charges dropped. So they weren't dropped, but the judge did say he did factor that in for mitigation. They also said that victim Bong Bong did not experience severe shame or embarrassment. And had she experienced more severe embarrassment, perhaps there would be a more harsh punishment. They also said, and this is very interesting, that the travel ban and the inability to return home were technical disadvantages for Somali. That was very curious to me, because if he had been allowed to leave and go home, he clearly would have not come back and not faced any punishment, never gone to jail. He would have just not come back to Korea. However, he did bring up aggravating factors. The aggravating factors he brought up were that Somali repeatedly committed crimes primarily for YouTube revenue and broadcasted these with no regard for the victim. He also said that Somali showed clear disregard disregard for Korean law. And this is something he understood from the files that we, myself and the Somali conviction team, submitted to them, showing that he didn't care about Korean law, he disrespected the judge, the prosecutor, and really the Korean system at large. He said that the Korean system is an absolute joke, and because of that, he wanted to show how much of a joke it was.
Shout out to President Yoon. Fuck the judge. Fuck the prosecutor. Y'all can suck my dick, bitch ass bitches. Yeah. Suck my dick on soft.
Now, he also did bring up the risk of repeat copycat crimes and saying that because Johnny Somali is a type of streamer which can be copied and repeated, this is a risk and they need to set a precedent to deter other streamers from coming in. Now, whether or not 6 months will actually deter people is up for debate. A lot of people, even myself included, think it's not severe enough to deter everybody, but perhaps it can be some sort of deterrent. But he did factor that in as an aggravating factor. So when he handed down the sentence, he explained very clearly it was 6 months in prison with labor that will be in a specialized prison for labor, also in a prison for offenders, because he had 5 years of offender status, so he can be nowhere near women or children, and he also has to be away from certain types of locations as well. So he can't do all sorts of labor, but he will be laboring in prison. He also will have an additional 20 days of detention, and his phones are permanently confiscated. He will never get back that Galaxy or iPhone ever again. The judge also explained that there are several questions about flight risk and whether he would be immediately detained. They gave him the option to remain silent, but instead Johnny Somali decided to speak and decided to lie even more. So when Somali spoke, the judge asked him if he was still a student. Somali lied. He said, yes, Arizona State University. We all know this is untrue. He hasn't been a student for quite a long time. The judge asked if there's any other reason why he should not be immediately detained. Somali said, I have family in my home country that I miss deeply, and I know I have to pay for my crimes, but I'd be grateful if you gave me a second chance because I think I can do better. Well, the judge kind of ignored this plea because it didn't actually answer the question of why he shouldn't be immediately detained. Of course, they're not going to let him go home. That's ridiculous. He's already been sentenced. The prosecutor stated, in fact, that he does pose a severe flight risk and should be detained immediately. Now, he was given another chance to speak to kind of respond to the prosecutor. Somali again lied and said, throughout the court proceedings from 2025 to now, I have refrained from doing anything to harass the public, so I feel this has taught me a vital lesson. Of course, we know that's not true. We have the sexual harassment charges that were filed based on his activity during that period, and those are filed in the Eastern District. We also had several instances where he was harassing people in public, where he was insulting people, getting drunk. So we know that's not true. But the judge said, okay, really, that none of that is relevant. We're going to find a significant flight risk and detain him immediately. So the judge then explained that there's 7 days for both Somali or the prosecution to appeal. This is very important because the prosecution can find that this was too light. They recommended 3 years and he only got 6 months. So the prosecution has a chance to go back, go to the court and say, no, we need more time. We think this is not fair. Somali can also try to appeal this, but the thing is for Somali, where appeals really aren't going to work in his favor, is the average appeal takes about 6 months. So if Somali is angry about this, he has to appeal from jail. So while he'll be in jail, he'll be serving that time. By the time he would appeal it for saying it's too severe, well, his term will probably be up. He'll probably be at the end of his sentence where he's already served that prison labor. Now, the bailiff did escort Somali out after that, after they explained the chance for appeal, the 7 days for appeal. His possessions were taken. Somali seemed to be prepared to go to jail as he brought a full backpack with all of his things, and he was handcuffed immediately and taken to a side room where he'll be bussed over to the detention center, and they'll eventually decide which prison to send him to. After Somali left the room and we saw him be, taken off and handcuffed, all the observers left. Now, Korean media was waiting outside, and myself, others, Atozi, we were interviewed about how we felt about it, and we gave our true opinion, which is we are happy that he was proven wrong, but we think that he deserved more time there. They also asked us if we were talking as YouTubers or Americans or whatever, and I answered that we're talking as people interested in the truth, and we're interested in revealing the Korean court process and getting the truth out there, both to Korea, Americans, everybody, and making sure he serves the time that he should serve and he's punished appropriately. So here's my judgment. Somali was proven wrong when he said, I promise you I won't spend 1 day in jail.
I know for a fact I'm not gonna go to jail. Not one day in jail.
I'm gonna show you guys how far I can push the boundaries, and I'm gonna show you that the Korean government is not gonna do anything to me. The Korean legal system is not as strong as people think and perceive it to be.
That it makes me very, very happy that Somali was once again proven wrong on that. However, objectively, 6 months and 20 days is a light sentence. At least 2 years would have been appropriate, particularly given the prosecution's recommendation of 3 years. That would have been a compromise where they didn't get the full 3 years, but they also didn't get a small amount. 6 months is too light. And because of that, we strongly encourage the prosecution to appeal, and we will be, along with the Somali conviction team, myself, encouraging the prosecutors to appeal. We also have the CHS child sexual harassment charges that are still floating out there in the Eastern District. We're going to be encouraging that district to bring those charges because those charges can be brought while Somali is in jail, and that could result in him being in Korea for an even longer time. But I want to know what you guys think about this final judgment about 6 months, 20 days in jail, and the 5 years of offender status. Do you think that's long enough? Do you think he needs more? And what do you think about the entire process? Until next time, bye. But I want to remind everybody that the Cabbage plushies are now live. So if you want to get one of these Cabbage plushies, if you like my coverage of the Ramzi Khalid Ismail Johnny Somali case, you can get one of those in the link below that's pinned in the comments and in the description. Thank you.